I think we're going to get started now. Today, we're very fortunate to have Jennifer Hennessey and Joshua Berger from, presenting to us about Washington State's response to, for helping the industry, the shellfish industry during the pandemic COVID outbreak. This webinar was to be presented at the recently canceled Shellfish Growers Conference, and we're very fortunate to have both Jennifer and Joshua joining us today to provide insight. Some of you might know Jennifer Hennessey. She is the Senior Policy Advisor on Ocean Health and the Environment for Washington State in Governor Jay Inslee's office, and she has worked on a variety of public policies to address ocean impacts for climate change, shellfish, water quality, toxics, and hazardous waste. Previously, Jennifer worked for over a decade as an ocean planner with the Washington State Department of Ecology and led the state's maritime spatial planning effort on Washington's Pacific coast. She holds a master's degree in marine resource management from Oregon State University and a BA in biology, environmental studies from Whitman College. Our next speaker today is Joshua Berger, who is the Governor Jay Inslee's Maritime Sector Lead for the state of Washington. He's also the Director of Maritime for Washington State Department of Commerce and the founder and board chair of Washington Maritime Blue. He has earned a master's degree from Antioch University in Seattle on participatory planning. He's also a licensed and professional merchant mariner, having worked in the towing industry and aboard traditional sailing ships as platforms for education and training, including nearly 10 years as a captain and restoration project manager of the historic schooner Adventurous. He lives in Seattle. And I am Terry King with Washington Sea Grant, and I'm pleased that we're able to provide this for you today. So I'm going to turn this over to Jennifer and Joshua. I'm going to finish admitting everybody into the room. So I will let us go. Jennifer.
Great. Thank you all for being with us today. And, I think we recognize that this is an amazing situation we find ourselves in with COVID-19. It's a crisis of unimaginable proportions. It's causing uncertainty and disruption across our society and economy. And our state's response efforts have been focused on managing and reducing the health impacts of this emergency. We've recently had state and federal funding that have been provided to help both our State Department of Health and local public health organizations and others to increase testing, availability of personal protective gear for health workers, hospital beds, and equipment for sick people. And at the same time, we also recognize the economic impacts of the actions that have been taken and have already begun to address some of those impacts to help reduce and mitigate them. And so today, we are here to talk specifically about the impacts to the shellfish industry. And we hope to provide an update on the situation as it stands right now, to cover what we've been hearing about those impacts, what resources are available right now, and what's in the works. And we also hope to gather your questions, concerns, and ideas. Your input is really important to us to help guide our efforts moving forward. And want to acknowledge that while we won't have all the answers that you might want today, we do genuinely take the concerns of the industry seriously and want to do what we can to help in this situation. Go ahead. So what are some of the things that we've heard? Go ahead. We know that the shellfish industry was one of the first sectors of our economy to start being affected by COVID-19 starting in mid-January. And we know that the industry was already being affected by a number of other factors such as tariffs, the court case on the core nationwide permit, unusual mortality events, and burrowing shrimp. And so there was a lot of uncertainty to begin with. And starting in mid-January, the decline in international and some domestic markets really started to hit the shellfish industry hard. As cases began to increase here in Washington, so have those public health measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And I'm sure many of you are living in this new reality alongside all of us, measures that we may have thought unfathomable just a month ago, having workers work remotely, shutting down large public gatherings, closing schools for 6 weeks across the state and across the nation now, and just this week, closing bars and restaurants. And furthermore, as the markets abroad are beginning to rebound in China, our state is caught with current limited ability to get product to that market. So we know that the depth of the impact being experienced by the shellfish growers is really wide-ranging. Go ahead, next slide. And so this is just a list of some of the actions that we've heard that businesses are taking to mitigate the impacts. And they are things like freezing hiring, laying off employees, putting employees on standby or shared work, reducing salaries, dealing with capital, halting construction of facilities or purchase of equipment and supplies, altering operations, and trying to plan for the future. And so those are just some of the types of actions that we've heard businesses taking. And we know that, that there are some really big hits that many businesses are taking in terms of laying off employees and large numbers. Go ahead. So we've heard a lot from the industry too on ideas of measures that would help. And those are a mix of short-term and long-term ideas, and they range from actions that the state can take or that the federal government can take, and other ideas. And so at the state level, we've heard ideas about reducing fixed costs. What can the state do to waive or delay fees that shellfish growers have to pay to the state, whether it's Department of Health or Department of Natural Resources? What can we do to help with marketing? Department of Agriculture in particular has programs and grants that can help with that. At the federal level, there's a number of different ideas that have been passed around, ideas around trade and opening new markets, providing relief from tariffs and helping with marketing. Ideas around loans in terms of loan guarantees or raising the limits for the Small Business Administration loans, specialty crop insurance, or even assistance from the Corps in terms of permitting and proceeding on that line. And then there are other ideas like grants to help with the cost for seed for the next season, helping with flights and crate mobility, or even rent assistance. So those are some of the ideas that we've heard so far from different folks in the industry. Go ahead. So what we do know is that the state and federal level has been activated to not only connect people to existing programs, but then to also assist in helping those programs be more flexible and putting more money into those programs. Go ahead, next slide. So I had previously passed out a website that was on the governor's website around coronavirus and resources for businesses. That has now been folded into a comprehensive COVID-19 response website, and it's here at the top of this page, coronavirus.wa.gov. We have a joint incident command that's working on the response for Washington State. And so that really is a comprehensive site for both businesses and workers, but also for people that are looking for health information and latest news and updates. And this is a good time to mention that simultaneous to this webinar is an announcement by the governor on some new measures that are around economic recovery and relief. So there will be some new information up there very shortly. So I'm going to hand it over to Joshua Berger at this point because he's really with the Department of Commerce and works closely with a lot of the programs that are available that he's going to walk through and some of the funding that's been made available just in the last little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. And I really appreciate Terry for being able to put this together and you all taking your time to come, you know, kind of engage with Jennifer and I on a whole bunch of these issues and opportunities, and then provide us really some good, clear feedback and input as we are kind of, you know, building the plane as we fly it, so to speak. So Joshua Berger, I work as a maritime sector lead. Really, my role is to be a liaison between the multiple sectors across the maritime industry. We say paddleboards to container ships and everything in between, and help direct strategic economic development across the maritime and ocean space. So, you know, our jobs over the Department of Commerce have really shifted to really be focusing 100% right now on how we are dealing with retention and resiliency and recovery with this crisis at hand. So I was going to kind of walk through and pick up where Jennifer left off in terms of state resources we have now, federal resources we have now, and then the programs, initiatives that are being put in place specifically, and then what we're kind of forecasting and seeing in some of the conversations we're hearing mostly at the congressional level in response. And then, you know, and I'll state that as we come back around to this, thinking about the programs that we start putting in place, there's great opportunity now right here at the forefront of this to be able to get your input so that we're shaping those programs to be most efficient and addressing your needs directly. Of course, as we balance that across what we consider maritime and ocean and all of the sectors that are being impacted, you know, by this work. So as you know, our state legislature just finished this interim session. What was passed last minute or two major things that are in a response to COVID-19. One is the legislature signed by the governor took $200 million out of our rainy day fund, emergency funding essentially, to focus on both health impacts and specifically $25 million out of that to mitigate costs directly to businesses. A number that is really being kind of focused on unemployment claims and how we're backing up increased and expanding unemployment claims. And then, you know, specific information on how that's being expanded and where you might fit. I know often there's some nuance in between kind of independent workers, small businesses and large businesses. I will say ESD is being really quite responsive to this work. I just heard today from some of the government affairs folks that just today they received 19,000 calls, but being quite responsive to this work. And I can answer some questions as we go forward on some of the specifics. Other areas where you're going to be able to find some resources directly with the Department of Commerce. There's a website set up that's focused on both large and small businesses, resources that are there across different multiple sectors, and opportunities for grants. And then, of course, the work that Department of Revenue is doing to support tax relief in various different areas. So, sure, Terry, be able to kind of send out these slides, or you can, you know, take a screenshot or use your phone to take photographs of the web links here. They all are connected to that original website, coronavirus.wa.gov. You can get to any of these from there. That's kind of your entry point, but look for these resources within Department of Commerce, Department of Revenue, and Employment Security. Federal resources that are in place right now, and we'll talk about some of the conversations that are going, specifically made available are Small Business Administration loans. These are emergency loans related specifically to COVID-19. They apply to SBA's definition of a small business plus nonprofits. In all 39 counties, I put an asterisk there. I have heard from Clark County specifically that loans were not available for Clark County. There was an error in the paperwork that was submitted, and that's being fixed right away. But all counties in Washington State are all businesses and nonprofits in Washington State and every county are eligible for these SBA loans. And you can imagine this with all going on. There's all sorts of rumors being flown around, and we're working hard to dispel those as well. And you'll actually find some FAQs back on that original website to help kind of myth bust some of the rumors around some of this. SBA loans are up and running. The portal is open. It's pretty easy to apply, and it is available to all small businesses and nonprofits in all 39 counties in the state. Some things we're working on, and some of that is timely, that the governor's announcing kind of right at the moment. Specifically, the governor is very specifically putting Lisa Brown, our Director of Commerce, and Susie Levine, a Commissioner of ESD, kind of in charge of coordinating across all state agencies on economic retention, resiliency, and recovery. So specific plans are being developed and deployed. Our two agencies are helping to coordinate across the rest of the state family on a number of this work, and you'll see more announcements and opportunities as that continues. Another piece that was enacted in this last quick session was an additional $3 to $4 million put into the Governor's Strategic Reserve Fund that is has been traditionally focused on retention, recruitment, and expansion, and supporting business development across the state. An extra $3 to $4 million have been made available specifically to respond to economic recovery and retention issues around COVID-19. Now, the Department of Commerce, we are still developing what that program is going to look like, put some kind of bounds around how those dollars are going to be delivered and where some of those priorities are. This is one of those areas where taking and getting input from you specifically and how we shape this is going to be really helpful. As many of you might know, Washington State is restricted in our ability to give public gift of funds. That's a constitutional restriction. And so we certainly still need to be able to follow those constitutional guidelines as we deliver these dollars, but they are quite flexible. And so getting some of your input on top of our typical kind of SRF, Strategic Reserve Fund deployment is going to be helpful, and I'll love to take some of that input. We also have additional dollars coming through our community development block grants. Those are dollars that are given specifically to municipalities and then encouraged for small municipalities, small cities around the state, and then encouraged to partner specifically with businesses, nonprofit groups, ports, tribes, and others to be able to deliver those CDBG grants across the state. And additional dollars are coming into that program that will focus again towards responding and recovering from the COVID-19 crisis. Federal efforts that are underway. Many of you are hearing the news seems to change every hour around the world, but also specifically from Washington, D.C. There are a series of these economic stimulus bills, and our state is working actually quite closely directly with Vice President Pence and across Congress to be able to kind of highlight where we see priority for funding. Conversations we've had thus far, and these are ongoing. Again, many of you are likely connected back to our federal delegation, and we'd love to make sure that there's some alignment in some of those communications. Some of our priorities that we see are enabling the Economic Development Administration, EDA, to deliver disaster relief funds. The EDA is quite flexible, and they can deploy money really quickly. We've had a lot of experience with them. Particularly with their disaster relief funds. So we want to kind of, arm EDA with a number of those dollars because they're easy for us to deploy. We also understand that there is a lack of real guidelines right now across multiple sectors in terms of how to best prevent, how to respond to an outbreak on a job site, where to get PPE, protective equipment, personal protective equipment. And we want to get the Department of Labor and OSHA and utilize this network of what we call the manufacturing extension partnerships more engaged in this work so that there's clear best practices and guidelines out there for all of you and everyone else. Is lots of conversation about industry-specific bailouts. And of course, we're having lots of conversations about the long-term response and being able to utilize major infrastructure investments as a way to come back to this. That's probably 12 to 18 months down the road, but starting to have those conversations now are really important. I think maybe this is really the point where we might take kind of a pause for a moment. I want to reiterate again what Jennifer was talking about in terms of here's an opportunity for us, across the state family, we're looking at a number of things. One is we want to know what measures you're taking for prevention or measures you might be taking if you're having an outbreak on your job site. We want to know kind of what impacts you're feeling, those immediate impacts and the long-term ones you're concerned about. And we want to know what your immediate and long-term needs might be. So as we're kind of keeping stock of these within the Department of Commerce and looking at, ESD is really charged in helping to address the immediate needs of you and your workers. And the Department of Commerce is looking at kind of that next step, medium and longer term response and how we address recovery. But we need that input from you. We are formulating some more formal ways to get that input. Some of that might be in the form of surveys. Some of that might be in continued conversations like these through webinars or ongoing phone calls with key stakeholders so that we can continue to inform the programs we build and what we're advocating for on a federal level. So maybe I'll pause there for a moment, utilizing Zoom here as a mechanism to get some of your feedback and answer some questions. Jennifer, if there's more that you'd like to add there or highlight or turn it back over to Terry to facilitate some dialogue directly with those on the Zoom call.
I don't have anything to add, but would love to hand it over to Terry to maybe facilitate us.
Great. So some folks on the call or on Zoom have realized there's a chat box, and I've put out a request if somebody has a question to ask or an impact to share or a question or concern that they want to share. People have been putting those in, and I'm kind of bundling them together so that I can ask them as a group to Jennifer and Joshua. And we do have a number of them coming in. So let me do one of the first ones is, what is the reality-based sense of capacity to process applications for loans and other support given the overwhelming volume to come? Is there any basis to estimate the timing from application to review funding? So this might not be a question you can answer today, but maybe something that could come out in the FAQs soon.
Yeah. So I may have at least a little bit of a non-answer to that. That's a concern, certainly. On a call earlier this morning with Representative Kilmer, that very question also came up. Well, we heard directly from SBA that portal is open, and there was a huge hire that just happened in the last couple of days in order to ensure that folks were staffed and we can process those loans as well as answer those questions. And literally those folks are going through a day-long training today. And so that, folks, the question is certainly aware of those concerns. We don't yet, I think have a full understanding of what the estimated timing is going to be. At least I haven't heard that yet. It's certainly something that I can track down to see if if they are estimating timing at this point. But they are staffing up in order to respond to the increase of SBA loans.
Great. So Jennifer, anything to add?
No, I think Joshua did a good job covering that one.
So this is along the same vein, it's someone's understanding that the SBA loans for shellfish aquaculture are limited to companies whose gross sales on a 3-year average are under 1 million. Is there any move to increase that or change to employee count?
So this is Jennifer, and I'll take a stab first, and then maybe Joshua can add more. I know that we're aware that that's a limitation, and again, the SBA would be the one that would need to get that, and Congress to get that changed. I don't think that happened in the initial SBA loan release, but it's certainly something we're aware of and wanting to work on as we move forward.
Great.
Yeah, the only thing I might just add to that is, right, that's the limitation of SBA and their definition of a small business. It's one of the reasons why we've been working quite closely with Senator Schumer's office on looking to get EDA closer into this game, both in loans and direct disaster relief grants, because the EDA is much more flexible in how those dollars and where those dollars can be spent. So, I think it's both looking at what flexibility there is within SBA, and we can help provide a lot of that feedback back to DC, as well as getting EDA a lot closer into the game at this point.
Great, thank you so much. So a question's come in, and it's regarding a company is paying for the insurance for all of their employees while they are underemployed. Will there be any help with this issue? Some compensation back to the companies for doing this, or could there be?
Yeah, I think that's good feedback. I think I'm not sure the direct answer to that. ESD it would be at the front end of that spear. That's a really good question. I know some insurance premiums are being covered, and there's a lot of talk about that at the federal level. I'm not sure we're quite there yet on the state level. I don't know, Jennifer, if you have more information on that.
I don't, although I do know that part of today's announcement had to do with employment security and creating even quicker turnaround. Normally there's a 1 week delay for unemployment insurance and other tools that they have at their disposal. So I know that we're working to make it as flexible as possible and release more funding for employers and for unemployment insurance specifically.
Great. So a slightly different topic is, what are the realities and timelines and possibilities of with regards to seed purchase grants for producers, for shellfish growers?
So this is Jennifer, and I think one thing that the state has to be really careful about in terms of our funding and things that we do is that we are limited by the Constitution, our state Constitution, and in that we cannot provide public funds to private entities directly. And so there's a sort of a test that has to apply in terms of a public benefit and also how we structure programs. So this idea of seed grants is one that has come up previously. I'm not sure how it could get structured so that it would meet that test. And we have fairly limited funding available at the state level for programs, but certainly would love to hear more ideas about timelines and needs around seed purchase to see if it's a reality. We don't know the answer to whether that we can actually make that work in a time frame that would work for growers.
Yeah, and I might just add, the Department of Commerce helps or has to manage that tension all the time through the Strategic Reserve Fund. And we have found some mechanisms if we're using, nonprofit or intermediary organizations in order to deliver those kind of public benefits. So there's conversations to be had. I think part of is getting a strong sense of exactly how much really seed needs to be distributed and what those dollars look like, and kind of talk through in both a kind of creative as well as really kind of pragmatic and realistic version of where those dollars can come from and how we can legally deploy those. So I think that's worth an ongoing conversation, but it's gonna take some creative thought and certainly conversations with the Attorney General's office.
Okay, great. So now all of a sudden all the questions are flooding in. So one of the questions coming up for the seed purchases is a comment that says grants for seed purchases may be too narrow or special, and perhaps something like an accelerated loan financing seems like a specific program that would reduce the risk of loss of production and revenue in the future. So one of the companies has come forward with restaurant closures. Oyster sales have dramatically stopped, and it is unclear when it will start again. One thing the government can do for us is waive, delay, refund the DOH oyster farm licensing renewal fee due at the end of this month. The fee is about $700, which is prohibited for small harvesters, considering there can be no sales in the foreseeable future. Will the government, DOH, waive, refund, or delay this application and fee?
That's a great question, and we have heard that that question just yesterday as well. And I know Department of Health is taking a close look at that that issue for the shellfish growers, but also for other businesses that they license. You know, one thing that we want to make sure is that we're not eroding our ability as a state to perform the things that we need to perform, but certainly understand the issues, and being able to delay those fees, you know, if we're able to make that happen, would certainly, I know, help. So we're in active conversations with Department of Health and others. Similarly, I think folks have raised DNR leases as another mechanism. So unfortunately, I can't just say yes today, but know that we are taking a serious look at all of those kinds of levers that would help reduce fixed costs, at least in the near term.
Great. So I think everybody's trying to catch up on their typing. So any questions anybody has, they can just pop them in the box. You guys are doing great. Are there any things that you're thinking about, Jennifer or Joshua, that have come up through the questions that you might want to, you know, put out there?
Yeah, I'm not hearing specifically. I guess one thing we might want to think about, and again, Terry, I'm grateful for Washington Sea Grant kind of taking a leadership and facilitative role. I know part of that came out of your annual conference that you host on these issues, but having the right liaisons in place so that, you know, this particular sector has got the right and ongoing communication channels to, you know, this is an interesting time. This is not like any other really crisis that we've been prepared for, where something happens and then you react and recover. We're in the middle of it for a long time, and it's kind of a new way and how we're responding to emergencies. And it's going to take, you know, if an emergency took good communication before, it's going to take twice as good communication now. And so having the right conduits for that level of communication and coordination is going to be really important going forward. And, you know, I think Jennifer and I are in positions to be able to kind of be liaisons for you there. And Washington Sea Grant, your role to be able to kind of consolidate information, make it anonymous if need be, just like finding good mechanisms among this group to be able to communicate and get information back is going to be important. And we're getting some good lessons across other sectors on how to do that well. I think kind of appreciate the patience getting to this point. Is, you know, we're all you know, reacting and finding the best ways to work with one another through this.
Great. Wonderful. And, you know, we at Washington Sea Grant are happy to continue helping provide these venues. And one of the questions that I'm going to ask at the very end is, was this webinar helpful? Did it, you know, it can't answer all the questions, but it can continue to keep the dialogue going and keep this issue moving forward, you know, as different things happen, because as Joshua and Jennifer have said, this is a quickly moving thing. And you know, we're not sure what's going to happen in the next moment, let alone the next hour or 2 days or 10 days. So one of the questions, you know, is from one of the producers is, do we have any idea when things might be getting back to normal? And I mean, that's hard. None of us are epidemiologists,
right?
You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I have in this rapidly unfolding situation, I mean, just in the last 2 weeks, it's, you know, made all of our heads snap, I think. The speed at which things change, it's hard to predict when things are going to, quote unquote, get back to normal. I think what the governor has said, we need to be prepared that we're not in a normal situation right now, and we shouldn't expect normal for a while. That said, I think the measures that have been put in place, even though they feel very extreme, if people take them seriously, that can help us get back to normal quicker. So I think that's the challenge, is it depends on all of us. to really make the smart choices and make the hard decisions and right now in order to prevent this outbreak from getting, really bad as it has in other parts of the world. Those of you that have been listening to the news about Italy and the kinds of impacts they've been having because they didn't take those measures early on.
Mm-hmm.
So we're hoping to spare our health systems and lives by taking the measures we're taking now, and that by doing that we can get back to normal sooner.
So this kind of goes along well with that question is, there's been some intimation, some rumors circulating about a potential shelter-in-place order. And the question is, would food producers be exempt from that if they have to shut down facilities like hatcheries, nurseries, seeding farms, etc.? This will be a multiple-year disaster. So that's just something that maybe could go on the radar. So that if those things were discussed at some point, understanding the impact to the industry related to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely appreciate that that concern, and we will make sure that gets relayed. I have not heard of anything being considered of that nature at this point. That said, things have rapidly unfolded, so. I don't want to make any promises about what policies are yet to come. And at the same time, I think the governor's taken it really seriously in terms of weighing the public health benefits and the economic impacts of the types of actions we're taking. And so I know that he takes those things seriously and would be, I think, weighing that very carefully if that were a policy you were considering.
Wonderful. So another question has come in. Is there any possibility that the ESD shared work program could increase the level of benefits available to COVID-19 layoff personnel? For example, greater than the usual 60% of salary?
Yeah, that's a really specific question that I don't have the answer to right now. I know that they are just trying to make more people sort of able to take advantage of those programs. So those programs are being both infused with funding, but also being spread more broadly in this particular situation. So I'm not sure how likely that is to happen, but we can certainly relay that information and that question on and try and see if we can find an answer.
Great, great. Another question is, can EDA money be used to establish a loan fund for seed purchases that growers can easily access?
Yeah, that's another really great question. Again, there's a lot more flexibility with some of these EDA dollars. There's also when you start pairing some of those EDA dollars with other kind of opportunity funds, and folks like Craft 3 and the National Development Corporation Opportunity Fund, et cetera. I think that we can start to get really creative, especially when you use some of those federal dollars to back essentially private low interest loans. It's a great question. I'd love to work on that specifically when we start seeing some of the EDA dollars and see what we can't get to. It's a good creative thought.
Great. So another question is, with the session over, is there any way to change things at the state level to allow money to flow from the government to private businesses?
We don't believe that that's an ability or a power that the governor has. The provision about private funds is in our Constitution, and so the governor acts within the powers that are given to him by the Constitution, and overriding that would take the legislature coming together with 2/3 to amend our state constitution, is my understanding.
Yeah.
Great. So we're all caught up on questions. If anybody else has another one, if they want to put it in the chat box. We will post, I can, if you'd like, send out the slides with Joshua and Jennifer's approval to everybody that participated today. Also, we can post them on the Sea Grant website along with the webinar video so that folks can see that there, as well as with the links to going to the governor's pages on COVID-19, etc. Just so that everybody has it. A number of folks weren't able to come, you know, and so we want to make sure that they have access to this information as well. So we have time for a couple more questions, or if somebody has impact.
Terry, I might ask it as well. If there's a way in which you can copy and deliver the stream of questions that we've received as well. So we can
I
take
can
note
do
of
that.
and we can follow up on those that we felt need some follow-up.
Sure, happy to do that. I think I know how. I'm pretty sure I know how. So here's
We're
a
all
question.
learning how to do this remotely now, right? And homeschool our kids at the same time.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
walk our dogs and everything we need to do. Yeah.
And stay 6 feet apart.
Mm-hmm.
So one question has come in. Is it true that SBA loans can only be given to those companies that cannot get a bank loan?
I do not believe that is true. No. Especially these specific COVID dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And rates are varying as well. And to be honest, I'm not sure what the logarithm is for that, but they're no more than 4% is my understanding, and they're not dependent on whether you're able or not able to get a bank loan.
Great. Here's another question, very sobering. Are there any state grants that can be provided to small businesses in the seafood industry to stay afloat and avoid bankruptcy?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any grant programs that can be directly provided to small businesses at this point in time, but the programs such as the SBA loans and the EDA loans that that Joshua mentioned are the ones that are available currently.
The other I might add are the SRF dollars. So you know, we are looking everything from very large closures to supporting small businesses and how we can respond to those. And so you know, I think we want to take that into account as we're kind of rebuilding this SRF account. And how we deliver some of those dollars. But you can imagine we're getting calls from, you know, from some very large employers out on the coast and elsewhere that are real concerned and would like to have access to those SRF dollars. And so that might be the one area that could be supportive. We just need to structure the program, you know, right.
Great. Any other questions coming in? I am not seeing any. Let me double check. All of a sudden, we got really wonky. And I'm not sure why, but we did. So any other questions for Jennifer or Joshua? Let me double check. I'm not, oh, there's one more. I figured out how to save it. Oh, one of the questions is, what is SRF? If you could just repeat what that is.
Thank you. That's the Strategic Reserve Fund. It's sometimes called the Governor's Strategic Reserve Fund. How that process has worked traditionally, and I can give some clarity. These are dollars that actually are unclaimed lottery dollars. And a portion of those unclaimed lottery dollars go into this SRF fund annually. Not all of those dollars, but a portion of them. And they are at the governor's discretion for economic development, for recruitment, retention, and expansion, and workforce development in key areas. So typically how that works is the Department of Commerce does the due diligence, finds opportunities, receives opportunities for those dollars, finds the intermediary partners, typically your local economic development corporations or associations, your ADOs. We can use ports, we can use cities, we can use other intermediaries like Impact Washington and others, and we can deliver those strategic reserve funds. Commerce makes a recommendation for the governor, and the governor signs off, and it's essentially a reimbursable grant through an intermediary to support recruitment, retention, and expansion.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We did have one last question come in, and it's talking about how to get help with getting into local markets within the Puget Sound region and out of state, you know, and not, wait, it's corrected, whoops, and not out of state markets, but things like Fred Meyer, et cetera.
Yeah, so, you know, Department of Agriculture has some funding for marketing, and as well as domestic as well as international. And so I think there's an opportunity for a conversation there about what can be done in a real local scale in terms of marketing for seafood and shellfish in particular. So that's definitely something that we've flagged as something that could be done and that we want to look at more and what the opportunities are.
Great.
There may be opportunities to crosswalk that. This is an area where the Department of Ag and Commerce work closely with one another. So Commerce also has their trade and export and STEP voucher grants and small business marketing tools. So there are some resources there on that Startup Washington site that are in the slide deck for access to some of those as well. We often work closely with the ag marketing folks. They actually rent space from us in our Seattle office. So we work quite closely with them often in you know, shellfish and seafood broadly.
Great. That'll be an excellent resource. So again, I will post the slides in the webinar. I will also send it to those of you that were able to join us or registered for the webinar today. You can always add impacts, concerns, questions to the WSG canal at uw.edu website or email address, and we'll take those and make sure that they get to Jennifer and to Joshua so that they have them as well. And then I think one of the questions that we have, since no more rolling in, was how helpful was this seminar, you know, this webinar for you? Obviously, it would be better to be in a room with everybody, but that's not allowed at this point. And we wanted to do something quickly, and so we thought this would work. And just so that as both Jennifer and Joshua are asked in the future to do these, and even, you know, should we do another one of these for the shellfish industry, maybe in a month or so? Just a question for everybody.
Yeah, and I would add, if there's, you know, helpful, you know, yes or no, but if there's specific feedback of other types of information, or even how we facilitate a webinar like this is helpful for us as we're, you know, looking to do this across multiple sectors, from hospitality to aerospace to advanced manufacturing. So thank you for that.
Great. So if you want to just put something in the box or send an email after you have another cup of coffee and think about it, that's great. But I don't see any more questions, so I think we can close. And I really want to thank Jennifer and Joshua for, you know, being able to be with us today. And, you know, we had to wait until session closed, so we knew some more, and then things just continue to change daily, but you're up to date moment to moment, you know, information really is helpful to everybody. And, you know, thank you so much for being here and spending this hour with us. We really appreciate it.
We really thank you for setting up the opportunity, Terry, and for the participation of all the folks on the line. I know it's hard when we don't have firm answers, but it's really helpful to hear your questions, and Joshua and I will work hard to try and follow up and find answers to some of the questions that we didn't know the answers to. So appreciate all of you for being with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to leave the chat box open a little bit for folks that want to continue that, but I think we'll call our webinar complete. And yeah, do reach out, and, you know, Jennifer and Joshua, let's be in touch and see, you know, if there's a chance to do an update in the near future.
That sounds great.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks.